Today on Heinz Barbecue, we try not to freeze to death. Um, it's 35 degrees out here, and cooking in the cold is a big thing that some people do and some people don't. Myself, I'm gonna cook in the cold because I love the cold. Also, we're doing something really different with the brisket that I've never done, which is slathering it in A1 sauce. And we've also gonna throw some pork butts on and do a multi-meat cook, which can sometimes not turn out as well. So hang around with us as we guide you through it. All right, so for our meat selection today, we got some interesting stuff here. Not super interesting, but we've got a brisket. This is a USDA prime brisket, and this thing weighed about 13 pounds. Trimmed down, we're probably at about 9 pounds, 9 to 10 pounds, something like that. But I'll get you guys a close-up of this in a minute. The reason why I like putting the A1 slather on there, I've just had A1 goes really good with beef. I've tried it on a lot of different things. I've put it on burgers. We've done it as long marinades, slow marinades, and it really just imparts a lot of flavor. The one thing I've never done is a 12 to 14 hour cook with it, because typically when you cook that long, any flavors that you put in there, it just eats the flavor up. It kind of just melds into the fat and it just becomes really mild. So I'm more interested to see if this will work on a brisket. Because if it does, then we've got some good ideas to come out with something that may be more of a powder-based seasoning. So also, we've got some little chunks of the brisket here. So the tail that I cut off of this, I did this when I did the back home cook at the farm, and it turned out really good. So I take these guys, I season them up a little separately. These do not have A1 on them. So this way we'll have a direct comparison over what has A1 and what doesn't. And there's a bunch of crows around me right now. I think they want some brisket too. So, but anyway. So we're gonna cook these along with these. These will turn into burnt ends. And they make really good burnt ends. And I don't have to cut any off of the brisket. So it's just kind of like extra burnt ends. So that's just the swoop off of the brisket. Up next, we've got 2 great big old pork butts. And all of these are just from normal grocery stores. I didn't get these from any fancy food store, Snake River, anywhere like that. So we've got the way I like to prepare these is we're going to score the top in them. This one had a really thick fat cap on it, so I had to score down quite a bit, pretty deep. If you don't do that, what will end up happening is that fat on top won't render if you don't get all the way through that, and I'll show you how deep this is in a second. Also, something that I do with both pieces of meat is I'm gonna dry brine these with salt for about 2 to 3 days before. Typically for a cut this size, probably about 3 days is pretty average. What that does, it allows that salt to penetrate deep down into that meat, which just gives you've got flavor all the way through the meat instead of just kind of on the outside of it. And I've had that happen with a lot of the stuff that I've cooked, and I think we've gotten to a good place now. At about the 3 day mark, it's letting that salt really sink all the way into that meat. So we dry brine these with just salt for about 3 days. So let's take a look at these things a little closer. All right, so you can see kind of how deep I've had to cut in there to get to the bottom of this fat cap in there. And that's what done. If you wanted to, you could spread each one of these open and season them. I didn't because it's all going to kind of fall down in there. And then the same way over here. This one didn't have near as thick of a fat cap on it, so we didn't have to score it near as deep. So the brisket, on the other hand, a little different. All right, so we got our brisket. You can see the outside of it. You can see a lot of the pepper in the top of it, but you can still see how thick that A1 sauce is on there. Like I said, not 100% sure if this is going to work. Might turn out to be terrible, but there's only one way to find out. So let's get them on the pit. So let's have a conversation about how I've got things arranged here. So one thing I like to do is I like to move my brisket flat towards the door. It's going to be a little bit cooler at this front edge, so it's going to allow that to kind of have a little bit more of an even cooking process. At least in this smoker it does. We've got a water pan set over here to our far right hand side. We've got both pork butts in here. Positioning on those really doesn't matter. And then we've got our little baby briskets in here just kind of sprinkled around. This is as full as you're probably going to get this smoker. And as we go through everything, I'll kind of walk you through the ins and outs and problems I'm going to run into. I'm going to have to rotate some of this stuff around possibly, but this, as far as this backyard smoker goes, this is about as full as you're going to get it. So we've got a brisket, these pork butts are about 8 to 9 pounds a piece, and then we've got a little mini brisket stuck in there. So let's shut this thing down. We're going to let this smoke for about 4 hours, and then we'll come take a look at it. All right, so we're at the 4-hour mark. This is about where we're going to take a look at it. I had to adjust it about 2.5 hours in. So what ended up happening is, because I've got so much meat packed on this thing, the edges of those pork butts started to burn because I'm trying to keep the smoker's temp. And I've got about a 75-degree swing on this guy because it's a lot smaller. So that being said, we'll take a look at what we've got in there and kind of see, you'll be able to see one side that kind of got a little crispy on the pork butts, but that's okay. It's just going to add to the bark, and it really helped to render that fat on top. So let's take a look. All right, so we're 4 hours in here, and you can kind of see on this edge right here, these guys got a little warmer. That edge is also starting to get a little warm. Brisket's looking pretty good, but we're going to come in here and spritz everything down. Anything that's kind of looking a little black, I'm just going to give it a little vinegar. That's all I've got. It's just apple cider vinegar in here. Put a little bit up here on the top, but they're starting to look pretty good. Yeah. Tops of the brisket's getting a little bit dunner than I'd like to, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. So, but there we go. That's what our 4-hour look kind of looks like. So. So another thing, what type of wood am I using? I get this question quite a bit. So we're using hickory today. And we've got these cut up in about 1 inch by 1 inch chunks. And they're about 7 inches long, 7 to 8 inches. We got the bark on them, and this stuff is pretty green. I like running greener wood. I think it gives a better taste. My own personal opinion. All right, one other thing I want to talk about is temperature and where I'm cooking this at, because I didn't mention that. And also, don't forget to grab yourself a beverage while doing this, because it should be enjoyable. Very tasty. So I started this cook off at about 200 degrees. I tempered this meat for about an hour, hour and a half. And a lot of this stuff is coming, if you check out Aaron Franklin's book, there's like 11 pages in there on the brisket cook. The nice thing is that the pork butt and the brisket are going to cook a little bit kind of the same. You can't really hurt the pork butt. The brisket you can mess up pretty easily, because there's 2 different types of meat in there. There's a lean and a fatty piece of meat, and they kind of overlap each other. So that's one of the reasons why I'm pushing that flat edge or the lean edge towards the door of the smoker. So that way this smoker leaks a little bit and I know how it cooks. So it's going to run a lot cooler at the door edge, probably about 20 degrees colder. I've put some probes in there and kind of figured out my cold spots inside the smoker, and that first 4 inches in front of that door runs about 20 degrees colder to the back of the smoker. So if you got a smoker and you're drying out that flat in the brisket, maybe try pulling that edge up to the front if you've got some air leaking through there, and it'll help cool it off. One of the reasons why I'm running a lower temperature to begin with, the lower you run that temperature, the more evenly that meat is probably going to cook. That's what I've found anyway. Could possibly be that, your smoker cooks a little different, but, who's to say on that frame, there's too many different variables out there to one way or the other, but that's the way mine cooks. So I'll run this for the first 4 hours at in between 200 and 235. After that, I'll bump up to about 250 to 265, and we'll stay in that range for about 2 hours. And then we'll go 275 to 300, maybe 310, trying to get the intermuscular fat or the big seam fat in there to render down some, and to get that, you know, 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch layer of fat on top of the layer of fat on top of the brisket to really caramelize and, you know, to kind of melt in, you know, to get all that flavor to kind of melt into that fat. So those are what our temperatures are going to look like as far as throughout this entire cook. The pork butt really doesn't care. You just want to render the fat on top of it. It doesn't have big chunks of intermuscular fat or seam fat, so you don't really have to worry about doing that. You could put a, you know, a pork butt on at 225 and run it for 14 hours and it'd be great. It's really forgiving. So that's why I like cooking pork butts with briskets, because they're very forgiving and I can pay more attention to the brisket. So that's what we're looking at as far as temperatures go. So have a beverage.
Right, so we're about 6 hours in. We're probing about 167 on the pork butts. The brisket's running a little bit behind at about 155, so it's hit the stall, pushing out a bunch of water. So, but it's time to get the pork butts wrapped, and then I'm gonna put them over in the box at 250, so that way I don't have to keep eating up wood, and it'll just give me a little bit more space on the smoker, kind of move the brisket around. So let's get that thing wrapped up. All right, so one of the things I like to do when I wrap it, I'm just wrapping this in tin foil, 2 rounds of tin foil. We're gonna hit it with some light brown sugar. And we're just gonna put this on top, and it's gonna kind of start to melt and caramelize a little bit. Add a little bit of sweetness to the pork there. So, and then just some of my pork rub. And that's it. Just to give it a little more seasoning. All right. Now we will wrap this up and we will throw it in the box.
All right, guys, so brisket's done. Just check the temp on it. We're running about 165 in the flat and about 167 in the point, which is kind of weird because typically you see those temperatures reversed, but it's super even. So we're gonna get this guy out here and get him wrapped up, put a little beef tallow on it, and then be ready to throw it in the oven. That's right, I said throw it in the oven because I'm out of time and I'm out of wood. All right, and there we go. And it is very barky. Looks super good. Oh man, it's kind of jiggly already, so super pumped about that. Got shut down. So we got some South Chicago Packing Company Wagyu beef tallow. I'm just gonna put a little bit of this on the top. It got a little dry. Well, I'm not even gonna say a little dry. I just like to have a little extra fat in there to protect things. So I like to roll. So I think we got plenty in there. So we'll go ahead and get this guy wrapped up. And before I actually put the paper down, after I put the paper down, I sprayed it with just vinegar. You can spray it with water, whatever. Just helps to loosen up the paper a little bit and, you know, keeps it from ripping in some cases. Sometimes it actually causes it to rip, so yeah. This brisket is going to go in the oven at 275 degrees, and I'm going to step up every 2 hours up to about 310 degrees, and that will be the cook for this, and then we'll cut it open. As you can tell, it's dark outside. Also, all of my lighting has stopped working. I don't really know why, so I'm using a Milwaukee light. At the frames I shoot at, it might look kind of funny, so it might be like stroby looking, so apologizing for that if that is the case. But our pork butts just finished up. They're probing about 205 internal, and they feel really good. You can pretty much just drop a probe right through them. So we're gonna pull these guys up, but the one test per usual is, let's find the bone, which is right here, and it pops right out clean. So that's a really good indicator that you've cooked it correctly, and I didn't even really have to tug on that. It just popped right out. So we are gonna take the one glove that I have left, and we're gonna turn this into pulled pork, get it put in the pan, and then hopefully move on to the brisket here within about the next 45 minutes. So I'll bring you guys in for a little close-up on this so you can see what it looks like cooked up. Whew. Can't even pick this thing up without it falling apart. So this is about as close up as I'm probably going to be able to get on this, but as you can see, just touching it, it's just falling apart. So that is some excellent pulled pork. So we'll get this stuff pulled up. Look at that. I'm not even like trying. Perfectly cooked. So got that great bark on it too. So good. Look at that, just whoop. Choop. All right, so the moment of truth. This has been a very long cook. Ran over, of course, brisket always does that. So definitely took 14 hours. And this thing is not even down to temp. We're not even at 145 degrees, we're at 180 degrees. I'm cutting it anyway because I'm wore out, super tired, but we gotta get this thing cut up. So let's see how the A1 brisket turned out. I can tell you that it is cooked really well. The fat is like crazy rendered. The bad thing is the bark did not set very good on this at all. So you can kind of see it's got some big splotchy places in there. Its appearance is not very good, but the rendering of everything is good, and it's like, you know, super duper flexible. So, you know, the only thing to do now is kind of cut into it. So let's see here. I'll make a cut like right here. We'll see what we got. So looks pretty good. All right, there we go. So like I said, this is definitely hotter than it should be cutting into, but smells amazing. It's got a really good smoke ring. That intermuscular fat, the seam fat, is rendered all the way through. So yeah. So let's have a piece of the flat. So I'm kind of really excited to see how this turned out. So there we go. I mean, it's like just super duper droopy. Still really hot. So let that cool off for a second. But I mean, it pulls right apart. Too bad it's so hot I can't even pull it apart. So it's a little tough. The fat is very rendered. It's like that translucent yellow all the way through. But yeah. It's super rich because this is a prime brisket. So yeah. Try a piece of the lean here. I mean, that's really good. So I'd say that's probably one of the best briskets I've done. I've tried some of the other pieces, the burn ends that we made, the little baby briskets, versus this, and I can't really taste any difference. So I don't think the A1 really did anything. If anything, it may have hurt it, and that's why the bark didn't sit really well on it. I don't really think so because there was just a massive amount of pooling when it was pushing all that water out. So I think that's really what caused the brisket to not form that bark on the top. But overall, really good brisket. I don't think the A1 really did that much for it. We'll taste it a few more times and we'll see if it's really true. Once it cools down, I'll really be able to tell once the smoke really sets in on it, and we can kind of go from there. But really good cook. Super glad that everyone's been tuning in, checking out the channel. If you have questions, please send them, shoot them out to us. Would love to answer them. If you like what you're seeing, subscribe, hit the like button. It helps the channel out a lot. And until next time, keep those fires burning.